Hello, hello, global citizens. It is Catherine here, your host of Future TV, and I'm back with another amazing episode, this time with Vik Maraj, who is a principal at the Unstoppable Conversations in Alberta, Canada, and a global transformation leader. He works with incredible leaders and organizations, both in the not-for-profit sector or the for impact sector, as well as the private sector. So Vik is really a stand for leadership and a better future for everyone on the planet. And Vik, I've known you now for I think about 7 or 8 years, and I know from knowing you that every conversation is an absolute, what I like to call truth bombs. You're like lobbing in you're like little hand grenades, and then there's like boom, like a truth bomb that once lobbed into a conversation, you see, oh my goodness, I didn't see that before. All of a sudden, something completely wonderful is possible, which can be fulfilled upon. So thank you for being here with us today. And tell us a little bit about you in your own words, who you are and what you're a stand for.
Yeah, I got it. Are you sure it's not F-bombs versus truth bombs?
Well, we are on camera, maybe next
Okay.
time.
Well, yeah. So I run a firm. I'm the president of a company called Unstoppable Conversations. We work globally we work with our work's not for everybody. We work with leaders who actually have the guts to actually make real change, rather than check a box or pick some off the shelf cookie cutter change program. They We work with leaders that can't afford that. They really are out for blood. They have to make a change. They want to make a change. So we specialize in disruptive change. How to cause it, manage it, fulfill it. Um, and yeah, we work. You said already, not for profits, large companies, governments. So that's what we do.
Disruptive change. I love that. And I know from my own experience, having worked in large organizations pretty much for the last 20 years, that there's a kind of ordinary, this would not be the disruptive change. This would be like
Mm.
normal change,
Yeah,
which is there's stuff to cut up and split out or put together. There's people who will be at the impact of that. There's people
yeah.
who have different jobs in making sure that happens. Tell us a little bit more what disruptive change looks like if that's not
Yeah,
disruptive.
yeah. Well, yeah. I mean, there's several things you don't have to do anything to experience disruption these days. So it's a different disruption I'm talking about. There's a lot of economic disruption going on. There's a lot of job security disruption going on. There's a lot of do more with less, particularly for HR folks, that's going on. So there's a lot of disruption already in the environment. But the kind of disruption I'm talking about is most organizations, when they need to change because of some economic crisis or market pressure, what's where they'll approach their change from is from the same thinking that got them in trouble in the first place. So it's very hard to stop being you, So organizations don't have a good way of revealing to themselves their own DNA. They don't have just a little DNA test that say, "Oh, we're this kind of type of company that thinks this way, that got us here, but that thinking can't get us there." That's not in the That kind of service is not normally in the marketplace. So people
Yeah.
go ahead doing what they already know, or hiring consultants that are part of that system where they're going to reorg, right size, downsize, resource cut, change policies. But what they're not ever going to really deal with is the mentality that for 10, 20, 30, 40, 50 years got them very successful. But, like every human being has a midlife crisis if they're told the truth. Like, what am I doing? What's the point? Well, at some point, every organization has a midlife crisis, but they don't really understand the nature of that crisis. It's a crisis of thinking. It's a crisis of being. It's a crisis of the paradigms they've used to get them where they got to are no longer relevant, but they can't see it, much less let it go. So, so I know that's a mouthful, but that's the level we deal with. We deal with that, and not every company's ready for that investigation. So,
I'm smiling because in my experience, I've also seen where leaders are having a personal midlife crisis at the same time that their organization is having its midlife
right,
crisis, and that's a particular double whammy of
yeah,
spectacular drama.
proportions,
But yeah, let's just say. Um,
yeah,
so let's go a little bit into the thinking. You were saying there's a crisis of thinking for the leaders,
yeah,
and that
yeah,
you work with leaders who are really, you know, up for the big courageous, the big guns kind of change and
yeah, yeah,
transformation. What's the starting point of kind of the? I guess there's like a wake up. There's the waking up to, oh my God, it's the thinking, but then there's the, take take the next step. Like, what does it take for leaders to take that first step?
yeah. Well, it's the most courageous step of all, and it's to acknowledge that we have a problem. And for leaders, that's extremely threatening. For most leaders, not all leaders. Some leaders are extraordinary. They got nothing going on about it. They're like, yeah, we got a problem. Bring in the best. I need help. What do you see? But that's not normally how most leaders are trained. They're trained in a very masculine kind of, and when I say masculine, I don't mean men. Some of the most masculine leaders are women I've encountered where they've they've given up that aspect of their femininity to make it. So it's a kind of I got it handled. I don't need you. Listen to me. If I want your opinion, I'll give it to you. Hierarchy. So most leaders are kind of indoctrinated into to appear to have it handled. So they don't want to show weakness because they don't want to lose the confidence of the people that follow them after. That's the bankrupt notion. So the first step for most leaders is the most courageous of all. It's like, look, we can't. What we have isn't getting it done. Help.
Yeah.
So that's the first step.
I mean, and that's a big step because leaders are supposed to know it all, right? They're supposed to tell everyone what to do. And the first step, acknowledging we have a problem, and maybe even I don't know what to do about it, to be
Yeah.
that blunt, does take courage. And I'm glad that you distinguished the feminine and the masculine, because last week I was talking to a man who coaches CEOs, and he had his first woman client, first
Mm.
woman CEO that he was coaching. And I offered, well, I've worked a lot with senior women, so if I can give you some insights into how they might be different, let me
Mhm.
know. And so when I met with him, he said, Catherine, the most amazing thing happened when I met this CEO and her team. And I said, oh, what is it? He said, she didn't say anything. Like, she just let the team run the whole, like, she just listened to the team, let them run the meeting, was asking them probing questions.
What?
It was like the most, you'd think he'd just saw pigs fly or something. Like, you just like, he was like, it was
Right.
the most incredible thing. He's like, usually
Yeah.
I can't shut up the CEOs. They're just, yammering
Yeah.
on the whole way.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I like that and that doesn't mean, I think it means that this woman CEO was probably pretty balanced in her masculine and feminine, I
Yeah.
think is
Yeah.
what,
Yeah.
what it probably means. Like, she was very authentically herself. So she was just
Yeah.
doing what she thought was the right thing for the team. Uh,
Yeah.
let, let's
Awesome.
let's let's move on to our well-meaning HR people. So, leaders
Mm.
are waking up. Okay,
Mm.
so yay,
Mhm.
leaders are waking up. This is a great first step. This is an important first
Mm.
step. Um,
Mm.
So let's say leaders have now wandered over to our human resources department, to share like, okay, things are starting like, oh, I've had this
Yeah,
epiphany, we really got to change,
yeah,
our people, like help us change. And at least in my experience, a very common conversation within HR is like, oh God, here we go again, like leaders running amok, like they've got some idea, like, oh God, they've got to change and we've got to, get all of these people on board. I mean, that would be kind of like a typical HR function. I mean, an evolved HR function would be like right there with the CEO and the senior
yeah,
leadership team.
yeah, yeah,
They would be like a part of that change.
yes.
But what would you say to, let's say, the second line of
Mm.
cultural transformation? That next group of people that have an important role to play.
HR,
What can,
is that what you mean?
yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
what can they do to access their courage, because
yeah,
they've got to deal with the whole fallout that's coming in terms of bringing the whole rest of the organization, you know,
yeah,
around.
yeah, yeah. No, look, I mean, from what I gather in the world of HR now, it's um, all change lands on them. So it's kind of like, I'll get, if you like in society, right, in governments, and most governments fail, just the system fails to take care of the most vulnerable. They just fail. We fail. I mean, you pick a country, we're failing. So the safety net for most countries is the layer called not for profit. So if not for the not for profit sector, the government couldn't, the societies wouldn't function. So not for profits, shout out to not for profits. They are an unsung hero in society. In companies, all change falls to HR, and
So
more and more.
are you saying HR is the not for profit in the
Well,
organization?
I was going to say I didn't intend to make that direct analogy, but oh, but
There might be
I think
something.
yeah,
There
there
might be
is something there,
something.
and yeah, yeah. Well, I tell you the parallel for me is and uh, and I'd say the same for tech in companies, technology and this CTOs and the CIOs, right? The their HR, I'll go back to HR. HR is doing so much. They're handling so much. They're so burnt out. They can't keep up from DNI to I mean that change alone over the last 5 years. Uh, there's it's everyone's mandated to talk about diversity now. Of course, nobody's really talking about inclusion that much, as you know. But people don't mind talking about diversity because that's the easy one. Oh, are you one of those? One of those? Do you have one of these? Are all commercials now of this kind of person? Check box, check box, check box. Oh wow, we've gotten our apparent diversity mandate covered now. Check, check, check. Are things any more inclusive? Not really. In fact, they're less inclusive because we have more diversity.
Yeah, I'd say it goes the other way. Yeah, yeah. The wild paradox. Yeah.
Exactly. So, but HR is the one that has to do all these programs and get this and get town halls and put this and that together. And then, and then all the IT changes with AI and see, it all has HR ramifications from payroll to benefits to remote work now. It's all HR. Look, so HR is like bearing an incredible load, including, I would say, the rise of mental health issues. As you said, the CEOs are going through look, man, this has given everybody a lot to deal with in the mental health domain. And HR practitioners are not mental health workers. By the way, neither the police, and the police are dealing with mental health because of the failure of society to have real mental health nets. So I keep making these analogies to society, okay? Like not for profit society are the catch all for society. The police are the catch all for, again, society, because our mental health system is brutal. So cops are doing jobs they're not even trained to do. HR is now bearing the burden of things it was not designed to bear. And they are barely keeping up, burnt out. So, really, so a shout out to a lot of HR practitioners, but um, leadership really has to get with the program. They've got to get access to other people who are very skilled in this deluge, that they're drowning in, and to bring in partners who have, the right kind of know-how, right kind of expertise, and stop living from, well, we'll handle it. Don't worry.
Yeah.
And the other thing about it is HR, like IT used to be, at the senior executive table, which I spent a lot of time at. The HR, the SVP of HR, and they've got to traditionally they're it's like I'm gonna be blunt about it. It's like they have a seat at the kiddie table. Okay, that's the bluntness of it. But if that can be owned, HR senior leaders can own that, they can then have the opportunity to drive themselves right to because they need to be a driver of the change, not take their orders from those who don't fully get the ramifications and the depth to the organization of the impacts of the latest whim that
Yeah.
somebody read in Forbes or HBR. They got to
Yeah.
drive that. And without having a seat and a voice at the table, HR will continue to be the lackey of executive thoughts.
Yeah. So let's talk a bit more about that kitty table. I love
Mhm.
all of these analogies, by the way. These are the truth bombs that are going off
Yes.
in my head, especially the policing. There's a reason why HR has a reputation like, oh, don't tell HR, we don't want to get in trouble, because
Mhm. Mhm.
employees see it as a policing function. So
Mhm.
it's a really great analogy. And in terms of the seat at the kiddie table, can we let's look to see if we can get to the source of what that is. Is it that HR professionals aren't demonstrating their business acumen, or is it that other functions, like, the CFO is always sort of the number two in
Mhm.
organizations, and the
Mhm.
CFO is the bean counter, like, but there's something very, very
Yeah.
tangible about finance, because you measure
Yes.
all of the minutia of all of these things. And
Yes.
is it because people are harder to measure, or is it an HR business competency that's missing, or is it something else? What do you see here?
Yeah. 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 It's a good question. Okay. So whatever I say is not the right answer. I'll just tell you what I experienced. It is in the world of measurability from what I've seen, because what a CFO deals with is highly measurable. But in businesses are most apt to their attention will go to what's measurable. Why? Because that's tangible, and it looks like we're doing something. That's the same with governments. When they want to make a change, they dole out a whack of money to some disenfranchised group and say, "Well, we made our change. See how much change we're making? We cut a check for X million dollars to the First Nations of Canada." Now, they have no idea how that's going to get administered, what's going to happen with it, but the money equals change. Of course, it's a total lie. Money equals money. You know, Money does not equal change. In fact, 4 out of 5 lottery winners are bankrupt in 5 years. Okay, so
Yeah.
money does not equal change.
Yeah.
Money equals money. Okay, but yeah. So the CFOs and even you could say the CIOs now, their portfolios are very tangibly kind of things. HR is more seen as a cost center. So there's money there too, but they're seen as more. So HR leaders, for my estimation, I work a lot side by side with HR leaders, progressive HR leaders, awesome HR leaders, and then I don't work side by side with other HR leaders who there's about 40% I'd find in HR leadership that's threatened by me. Like somehow I'm trying to replace what they do or show them up. And that's another part that's kind of an immaturity in some HR leaders. And there are other just wickedly awesome HR leaders that are like, they see our synergy just waiting to happen, right? Um, but either way, I'd say there's a traditional role for HR, like when I said the kiddie table, where they're seen as the executor of something, not the driver of something. And this has been the case for CIOs for years too. Although in my experience coaching both groups, CIOs have shifted. That's changing more. Information systems, they're the wise and effective CIOs are getting way more say in the digital landscape. It's undeniable. I mean, that person touches every realm of the organization now digitally, from DocuSign to AI now. It touches everything, right? But so does HR. But that hasn't been made damn obvious that the heart of the organization are people. And when we say just when you began the call, like the organization, right? We talk about organization. What the hell is an organization? Is it the staplers? Is it the computers?
It's a bunch of people.
I do believe it has something to do with the people and how they function, and that they function effectively might be a big part of this thing we call the organization, but it's not very measurable. How do you measure affinity? How do you measure the capacity of influence? How do you see? These are hard things to measure. So they're not but HR's not doing there's so much more to be done to drive that into the executive level, like get with the human program, right? That HR we're not doing. We're just not doing a great job of it. And that's mostly because of our traditional role where, so for me, most HR practitioners need to break out of a don't rock the boat mentality. And that's a conversation I had this week with a large multinational oil company, by the way. Uh, you know, you really got to break out of don't rock the boat. Nobody wants to rock the damn boat around here. So you mind your P's and Q's and business as usual. Do what you're told. Nothing really changes. Hey, but you kept your job. Wow,
And
super
what a great
inspiring.
job it is,
What a
too.
great job surviving the whims of somebody who means well too, by the way, but is not in touch with what you as an HR leader is so in touch with.
Yeah.
It's time to drive it, not just be a patsy to what comes down the pipe. But
Okay.
these conversations I have with people, although they may be accurate and valid, only a few are willing to hear it. Hence, we don't work with everybody.
No, you really only work like you said at the beginning, you really only work with the leaders who are really up. I mean, it takes such courage to be that leader who is honest. Like, we got to change around here, folks. And, I get that change starts with me, and here's what I'm doing differently. I mean, that is just wild. And maybe in the 1 or 2, maybe 3%, I'm always optimistic. Um, but let's move on to another group in the organization, the largest group, which
Mm,
is your average employee,
uh-huh.
the people who signed up to exchange, most of their time of the day. You spend more time with people at work than you do with your own family. They signed up for a paycheck and to give their talents and their time and attention and their effort and their
Mm,
energy to this
mm,
organization, this group of people that they
mhm.
signed up to. Uh, what can they do to access their courage in the dynamic that is, leadership says this over here, and HR scurrying around putting them through a process over here? What can they do to be that third point of the triangle? Like,
Oh,
balance
yeah.
out and carry the not carry the load, but I see every employee as a conscious citizen. That's how my
Mhm.
kind of view of employees, and that
Yeah.
everyone who works for a company, has the I'm a stand that everyone is able to fulfill on whatever it is that they come for, whether it
Yeah.
is just turning up for a paycheck or whether it is to self-actualize, that the work they do is linked to their purpose. They want to be a contribution. They want to make impact. What's their role in transformation? This majority group
Yeah.
of the
Yeah, yeah. Well, I
organization.
mean, they're the ultimate role. I mean, they're the ones who are going to fulfill on the grand change schemes, aren't they? I mean, without the people doing the work on the mid to front line, as designed from the ivory tower, okay, without them executing uh, effectively, the organization's dead. Without the salespeople selling, without the internal people doing what the internal clients will, without all of it, the finance. But so yeah, ultimately, it's the corporate citizen that is the majority of the organization. Um, but in most cultures, there's not really that kind of permission that most employees, even though we talk about empowerment, most organizations are still run by the hierarchical mindset, which is, come into my office and, yearly performance reviews. And most of the time, it's not a mature conversational model like every day with their leader, right? About corrective measures and what do you think and what do I think? And it's generally, in my experience, and I work with some pretty big companies, it's not a side by side function, right? So it's very hard for the average employee to actually experience this thing called empowerment because the culture is hierarchical. It wants to be empowering. It's really enlivened by the notion of a flatness to the thing. It's inspired by it. It's just hard to execute it because it still thinks from a traditional paradigm. But it wants all that stuff. So when I work with employees, it really does at that level, the weight of your place is overwhelming. Like take your place in your organization, it's overwhelming. It's only the odd person, in my opinion, that breaks through and is able to feed up feedback. What the way in our work we call it leading up. Very few employees can lead up, which is the true measure of leadership. Leadership is not by position or title. Leadership is a way of being. You don't
Yeah.
need any of those titles to be a leader. It's very tough, just like it's tough for a kid to lead up to their parent. Don't talk back. Children should be seen and not heard. I mean, who's not indoctrinated? Then you go to school. You're not going to talk back to your teacher. And then you come into the workplace. You think you're going to start talking back now? I don't think so. What kind of fantasy growing up did you live? No, you got indoctrinated into don't talk. So for all of a sudden now you're in the workforce to talk back, very tough and
Yeah.
often not welcome,
So,
as you know, being one of those people.
yeah, yeah, absolutely. So I'm curious, just before I ask people how they can connect with you and your organization, I'd love to hear if you have a recent example of someone leading up, uh, where where change in an organization wasn't top down, but actually some sparks came from within. And yeah, who's inspired you recently in this kind of act of courage
Oh,
or
man.
bravery?
Um, yeah, I'll pick a company we've worked with just recently. It's a large family-owned company in Canada. Okay, they make farm equipment and uh, and uh, and fitness equipment. They're very, very, very strange two lines of business. Okay, but they're 60 years old, and they're again. So I've coached the senior executive, the dad, who's awesome. Basically built the company from nothing all the way up. So very successful. They're across Canada. He's in his 60s now, and he spends, half his time he's trying to succession plan. But his kids, they're in their 20s. They want to do it, but they don't kind of have the maturity yet. So I started coaching literally his kids and other brothers' kids. And at some point, I coached one of the sons, and I said, he's like, when I really want to be a leader here, but Dad won't let me. Dad always corrects me. Dad has his way. If I don't do Dad's way, so after one of the coaching conversations, I said to him, I said, look, I want you to consider possibility that your dad is waiting for you to wrest the throne from him, and that you haven't demonstrated the moxie or the conviction yet that you really want this. You talk a good game, but you're not being a leader. I go, capiche? He goes, okay. I said, so you want to get your ass in that room right now, and you want to have a straight conversation with your dad about your vision for the company, who you are in the matter, who you promise to be. He goes, but I said, hang up, get your ass in there right now. So he goes in. So awesome. Guy calls me back 3 hours later. I go, what took you so long? I said, just go in. He goes, we just finished. I was like, really? He goes, my dad was just moved to tears by who I was being. He said he appointed me now to president of the company, interim conditionally. He's going to Mexico for 6 months, and he's going to entrust me. And by the way, this guy's kicked ass since then. Ushered in a whole new era. The guy's he gets it as a 20-something millennial. He brings in a whole new way of thinking that's relevant to the public, and so he's kicked some butt. But that's an example of what that looks like.
That is the absolute perfect endpoint for this conversation, leaving people full of possibility with courage and action, courage demonstrated in a real time, like in 3 hours, what was possible from his ordinary way of being to bringing straightness and leadership. I mean, it's just absolutely extraordinary. So,
by the way, his dad called me. His dad called me a little bit. He goes, "Do you know what my son just did? It was fantastic."
You're like,
I said,
yeah,
"No way."
No, I had no idea.
No, he knows I coached him. He thanked me, but it would have been a nice little surprise. No way.
Yeah. Then it's legacy. Then your work, does itself. You're no
Yeah.
longer required.
Yeah.
So global citizens and conscious citizens, I'm going to share the links and instructions for how you can connect with Vik and Unstoppable Conversations. Vik, you are very generous in your time, so you often have webinars and things that people can attend to try on. All of your webinars are very interactive, and like within about the first 5 minutes, it's like, okay, what's everyone dealing with? And you're like, oh God, I've like actually got to say. So they're super, super powerful.
Yeah, they're engaged. They're engaged. They're real time. They're not some slideshow fluff.
Yeah, no, this is not like kick back and watch television. This is like, if you've been inspired by any of the last 33 minutes today, this is your opportunity to put some skin in the game and just register yourself into something that will, I'm not being overly dramatic, like will forever alter the course of what you're trying to accomplish. And you'll thank both of us for it later. So Vik, thank you for today.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
thank you for every day that you're out there doing the work that you do. I love being a co-creator and collaborator with you. So yeah, until next time.
Yes. Pleasure. Thank you for having me. It's just great.